Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are and what time you're tuned into the Front Runner Football Podcast, part 2 of 2 for the week. And this one is coming out or was recorded on the 28th of May. So it's been a couple of days since our last podcast. And this time around, we have SAFJA joining us alongside Jonty. Mazola Molefe will join us in a few moments' time. Good evening, gents. Welcome to the podcast. You had a good week, starting with you, Jonty.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit freezing cold in Johannesburg at the moment, but yeah, the week's been fine. I think kind of happy that Monday is you're able to go to a shop and buy a bottle of wine. That's cheered me up. And yeah, hopefully we're going to get some football at some point. So some of the leagues in Europe certainly seem to be coming back. I saw that England announced the EPL's back June 17. So
right.
Maybe the PSL can follow suit soon, but there's a lot of red tape to get through first, I think.
Yeah, we'll discuss that story that you ran in terms of the two FAs coming together. Velile, the week for you, how's it been? Anything that's kind of sprang out at you before we get into the show?
Yeah, it's been a crazy week with the books, studying and stuff, and then having to balance as well, and also trying to also do things with Jonty as well. We are about to welcome him as one of our new members.
Hallelujah!
All right, yes. Yes. I like the turnaround time.
I know it has not been easy with some of the guys, but look, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. As things stand, I think we were going towards the right direction. I know this is Jonty has been around, and I think they've tried to revive this structure in the past. But I think in the manner it is going now, and some very good things, especially for not only for us but for the future generation of football reporters who are coming in, and I think. This platform will also be one of the first to be updated on what's the next step.
For those who are tuning in and not
Velile's
what Velile's talking about, it is the South African Football Journalists Association that was recently convened, and Jonty is soon to be a card-carrying member. Correct?
No, I am.
You am.
Waiting for my form that I simply need to fill in. Apparently, I'm waiting for it to arrive in my inbox, which I'm expecting soon. And but I do think I've been around, and this kind of thing is we've tried to, or other people have tried to put this into being. But this is the most concerted effort, and from a group of very good and very good journalists, and to create a community like this, I think is important because there can be within this industry a lot of egos and a lot of I'm better than you and you're better than me. But I think what's more important is that we create a community. Going forward, and we have one voice, and especially like SAFJA have already stood up, obviously against SAFA.
Yeah,
I never did see that public apology on the SAFA website.
Nothing. You wonder.
Some politics there. Some politics there, but you know what? Some politics there, but you know what? I didn't really want. It's a story. It's a story for another day. But some of these things are very disappointing. They're very disappointing how people do these things in the game, But I think what makes me happy is the effort that team knows, the lengths we've gone to make sure that this thing works, and then it gets the apology. But when people now say something in another meeting and then they renege, but you know what? That's what we've decided with the guys that, there are more important things. And one of the most important things now is to form our organization and not try and dwell too much on people who are trying to solve divisions in our industry. So what makes us at least happy is that our member, or should I say maybe in team who's going to be our honorary member, he knows what we've been trying to do. As for the person who's reneging on what he had earlier agreed on, I cannot say much.
Of course not. Of course not. But we'll take the small victories because I guess, there is a victory in there, the faults being admitted to. Of course, we didn't like it. We don't have it with all the bells and whistles, but you got to take the small wins and, like you say, not dwell, move on to things that require your energy and attention. But yeah, congrats on the formation of it. And I wish you all the best moving forward. And speaking of bodies, SAFA and the English FA, Jonty, apparently have come together. Joined hands in the time of elbows to work together on this COVID thing. What's the relevance there? What's the significance of this coming together?
Well, I think if like the English FA can share information with SAFA going forward and how successful they've been, give them some key tools in what the best health protocols are in terms of getting football back, then it's a good thing. I mean, obviously, like I said, the EPL have announced today they're going to play on June 17th. So the Bundesliga really set the standard for that, and everyone's sort of following their lead. La Liga will start up, I think, next week on June the 8th, and then the EPL will follow, and then hopefully the PSL will get up and running. And I think if there can be a cooperation agreement between SAFA and the FA, then that's great. I do also agree with the point made that perhaps it should be between the PSL and the Premier League, this agreement, in terms of moving forward, because those are the two bodies really in charge of making sure everything goes smoothly. And in terms of, there's obviously a lot of red tape and a lot of things that need to be put in place for football to go ahead behind closed doors, for it to go ahead in a sanitary way. And it's not an easy process. I think obviously Germany, as I said, have set the standard, and it is possible, but there are also very much on the ground realities that in South Africa that I don't think you'll find in Germany or perhaps in England as well. So I don't know how efficiently this can be done, but I'm hoping that the PSL's report is extensive enough that it can be pushed forward and that we can at some point get some football going.
Yeah, Slavich, if I was looking at an earlier report this morning, it would have seemed the earlier reporting suggests that SAFA kind of got their way in this joint committee, even leading up to this meeting that happened today. It was because, now the PSL had to kind of work within SAFA's framework. Is there any truth to those kinds of reports? Are we hearing who's got the higher ground between the two sides in this committee that they formed?
Well, Kamza, I think it's important to also be clear that SAFA is the mother body of football in the country, and I would take it that they are leading the process. The Joint Liaison Committee is a committee of SAFA, but it also involves the PSL as well. Right. So it's normal for SAFA to be leading the discussion in this case, because they are the mother body and they are the ones who communicate with CAF and also FIFA in this case. So there's nothing wrong with them taking the lead in this thing. But I think on matters of the readiness and also the plan, it's only the league which can have that, because this is their program. Professional football falls under the PSL. It goes back to what we've been saying for the past few weeks, that even now, when you hear about the EPL coming back, you are hearing about how many clubs have voted. This is the situation we've been hearing in all the other leagues. So it's just that here at home it becomes something different. But also in this case, it's not only about what SAFA or what even the PSL wants. It's also about what government is saying, as we've just heard today, as we're going to level 3 on the lockdown regulations, it's clear there that in terms of professional sport coming back, it's only non-contact sport. But I think it does also open a chance for professional sports, especially like football, on individual training, or returning, having 5 players training at a time, maintaining social distance and all those things. And I think the meeting of the PSL executive committee today. I can also link it to that when you hear that the Minister of Sport, Nathi Mthethwa, will be addressing a press conference on Saturday. So maybe it's also a timeless meeting to put in those requests. Okay, we're not coming back to play. There'll be no contact sport, but just to train, because if we're back now on level 3, and let's say maybe for the whole of June, something happens, there's some progress that will be made. Most leagues, they've taken at least a month to be ready for training.
Yeah.
In fact, to be ready for game time. So maybe the request that the PSL can put now to the National Command Council is at least to allow them to come back and train. Because if you're allowed to run as a group of 5, you can also have players training in a group of 5, maintaining social distance and all those things. Especially when professional sport, non-contact sport is also allowed. Because when you're training and you're 5, you're maintaining social distance, there's no contact there.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's a noble cause and a good argument. You just wonder about the policing and if that's something that they would worry about in terms of how do you maintain that social distancing in a club situation? Whereas at match day you have the referee, the commissioner.
I was reading the rules. I was reading the rules just now of the government regulations. I think every company where you have your staff back at work, you are forced to have a compliance officer, a COVID-19 compliance officer. So I would take that these are some of the things that each club, and I think this is one of the things that also the PSL in its documents, which they've submitted, they also have that.
Okay.
I mean,
just to add to that. But go ahead, Jonty.
Yeah, but my understanding at the moment is that Velile mentioned is the timeline is to get back training in June, and then they hope to get the season done in July. In these contained environments like you're seeing in the Bundesliga and other leagues, where they hope to isolate the players, and then I think they're planning, way I understand it, they're planning to get it done all up here in Johannesburg, Pretoria, and Rustenburg as the 3 main sites to finish the season off. Whether that can go ahead is very much dependent on the government relaxing the lockdown in July. We'd have to go, I think, to level 2 because it's quite clear. But you can do, as Velile mentioned, non-contact group training in June, I would think. If you're saying non-contact professional sports are allowed, there's a very good argument that training in a non-contact way is fine for professional clubs. And I think then it's also up to the club on many levels to manage that, because they'll be there, they'll be the ones who are on site effectively. Well, the league can help out, but the clubs must take responsibility for their own sanitation, their own testing, their own behaviour, and whether that will go smoothly, we'll have to wait and see. But I think that's generally the plan going forward, and hopefully, seeing the example set by other leagues, it can happen. The only problem we have here right now, though, is our infection rate is going up.
Right.
While all the other leagues at the moment that are starting again have gone over that peak, and their infection rates have started to dip. So I'm not sure what impact that will have on a government decision going forward.
Mazola, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. I see, obviously, today you've been reporting about this meeting that was supposed to happen in terms of the round 2 with the Premier League's executive committee convening today. Anything you can illuminate us on in terms of, where that all began, in terms of the need for that meeting and what we can expect to come out? Veli's already touched on the fact that Nathi Mthethwa speaking on the weekend, that might have something to do with it. But how has your reporting kind of led you, or what conclusion has your reporting led you to?
Hey, those 2 guys have said a mouthful there. They
didn't leave anything out?
They took my shine.
That's what happens when you're making dinner.
But look, I think it's pretty much what both Velile and Jonty have said. What I heard is pretty similar. As you would have seen in the story that I did this morning. It's protocols around restarting play, whether it's training or whether it's the actual matches. It's the proposed venues. I think Jonty spot on with Rustenburg, Johannesburg, and Pretoria as sort of the main sites. It's about 54 fixtures, give or take, between the top division and the second division. And also the Nedbank Cup semi-final. As we know, Vets were scheduled to play Mamelodi Sundowns, and I can't even remember what the other semi-final was. That they would look to complete that as well. And I mean, I just saw now in the PSL info group that the EXCO meeting has actually been adjourned, but it doesn't look like we're going to get a statement, which is, again, it's disappointing especially if you look at sort of leagues around the world, especially the leagues that we're trying to copy. They've been pretty transparent about information. They've been telling, there've been reports, obviously, that clubs are either voting or, they're taking you through the process, as it were. But with our own PSL, we've sort of been kept in the dark. We've been reduced to merely just speculating and getting information from our own deep throats within the two federations to kind of figure out which direction they are going at, and obviously because of that, there'll be more speculation about different types of venues, whether the league starting. It was first it was the completion of to start again sometime in June. Now we're looking at a restart sometime in July, with coaches only able to get to training with the players in the start of next month, the start of next week, which is sort of that 3-week period that they would need to sort of gain fitness again before they can start playing in July. And I think once they do, it will quite possibly be World Cup style, to try and finish the remaining sort of 55 odd fixtures in a space of 4 weeks.
Okay, I mean, that is a huge undertaking, and it's incredible that these are the things that were being discussed. This joint committee that was supposed to report back on Tuesday, what would the discussions have been all this time if now we're only hearing about how things are supposed to kind of be put together? Any takers as to what could have been the substance of those discussions if only today are we kind of honing in on a way to move forward?
Yeah, I think the discussions would have included around some of them. I think the sports physicians. I think the team being also led by Dr. Thulani Ngwenya, who's the head of medical at SAFA. Possibly also putting heads together with a few other sports physicians around the country to come up with a proposal to make sure that they meet the health and safety regulations, and then pitching it to the joint liaison committee, which if we calculate from the 12th or 13th of May, if my maths is spot on, then they've missed the 14-day deadline. So why put deadlines and then still miss them, and then still have meetings upon meetings? Look, I get that it's important. It's an important decision. You have to have as many exhaustive meetings as possible to get the decision right, because even when you do make it, there are some quarters that are going to be against it. Some will be for it. It will be a matter of majority rules, sort of. But give us the information. Tell us what it is that you're planning, because journalists are waiting, people are waiting, players are waiting. I don't know. Almost on a daily, I've got a few players asking me if I know anything. I'm like, mate, I'm just I know as much as you at this moment.
Yeah, for sure. That's an interesting one, because that also kind of brings into the whole spotlight this topic of players who are now, possibly come the weekend, at the end of a contract, so in terms of, I know the spotlight is on a Jeremy Brockie, for instance, who, doesn't know what his future holds. And this is what comes into play now with the weeks and weeks that have gone by. Players are running out of an opportunity to show what they're made of, and whether they need to stick with certain teams. That window seems to have been bypassed now due to the coronavirus outbreak. And then Sunday's on the way. No way to remedy that. What happens now in the case of a Brockie? We'll speak about players in general in a second.
Yeah. Look, obviously, I think Brockie, I had an interview with him this week, sort of just asking him, what's the plan? Have you heard back from Sundowns? What are the deadlines? And the deadline is Sunday. If Sundowns don't get back to him by Sunday, and also his agent has confirmed this to us as well, that if Sundowns don't, make a decision on Sunday, on Monday morning or at midnight on the 1st of June, Brockie will essentially be a free agent. And I think that's where his future lies. So unlike the rest of the other guys whose contracts are due to expire 30 June, Brockie will know sooner rather than later what the future holds for him. And I think there's already been sort of reported interest. I think SuperSport are keen on having him back. But once he's a free agent and he's got his clearance, I think that just about opens up quite a number of opportunities for him. Look, he's 32, turning 33 next season. The jury is sort of now out on whether he still has that scoring touch. But when you've scored 40 goals in about 100 games, I suppose you should still be given a break to say you can still replicate it somewhere else if you get the regular game time and you sort of start afresh. But the proof will be in the pudding. But I think in as far as Jeremy is concerned, I think he's close. He's edging closer to knowing what next steps to take. Whereas a lot of his other colleagues in several other PSL clubs, the wait is still a bit longer because they have to wait until the 30th of June, potentially even longer, because I think obviously that the PSL has kind of in principle agreed that the season will go obviously beyond the June 30 deadline,
right?
And players whose contracts expire 30th June might have to sign short-term contracts, like we've seen happening. Especially, well, I know with my team, for instance, in Europe, Chelsea. Some players whose contracts are coming to an end in 30th June have had options extended, and there's talks of short-term deals being signed so that they can finish off the season. So I think the PSL probably heading in that direction as well.
Yeah, Jonty, what does this do for his time at Maritzburg? I mean, if this kicks in on Sunday, do you see him sticking around to help them through it? Or, do we have a Dean Furman situation where the player is now going to be looking for a club to call home?
Yeah, I think there's some technicalities there, because if he's on loan at Maritzburg until the end of the season, then the season goes until July the 30th or whatever it is, then maybe there's some disposition that can be put in his contract, or something that can be put in his contract for him to play for Maritzburg, or at least try and help them in their battle. I don't think they're realistically challenging for the title, but they can easily finish top 8 this season in their battle to finish as high up the league as possible. Does he stay for that? But from what Mazola is reporting and what Laduma are reporting today, it looks like he's considering himself a free agent, free to talk to other clubs. So whether he then reaches an agreement with the other club, because I presume even if he signed for another club, he would only be able to play for them next season.
Sure.
So whether he can reach a short-term agreement with the other club to then give him back to Maritzburg for the rest of the season. But I think you're going to have a lot of complicated issues like that, which I think they're trying to resolve, from my understanding, by doing a blanket agreement between all the clubs. They just say, okay, current contracts now automatically run until...
Yeah.
But there are sort of legalities around that, and it's also my understanding that if a player has an objection, he can also say, my contract's run out on June 30th. Sorry, I'm off.
Yeah, of course.
May 31st in Brockie's case. It's kind of their prerogative as well, but there's hope that there'll be a sort of understanding that we're in exceptional circumstances, and in these exceptional circumstances, players can just say, okay, I was signed on to play for this club till the end of the season, so I'll play for them to the end of the season. and hopefully.
You know, this time around, we have a Maritzburg side where usually this time of the season it's looking rather precarious from them. Jonty has pointed out that this Maritzburg United side, top 8 is the objective, you know, with the games remaining to get a place in that come season's end, which then brings into question, do they need Brockie? Do they need to try and convince him to stay for that extra month or two? Or can they just kind of say, hey, we tried, didn't kind of get the ROI we were expecting. Thank you, sir. We're happy for you to move on. What do you do when you're Maritzburg in this scenario?
Yeah, look, the issue of contract extension, especially with the situation we've had around COVID-19, it's affecting football clubs globally. And it's also FIFA, which has also came up with these temporary rules which allow that the contracts would also be valid until the season ends, irrespective of when that season ends, you know?
Right.
So I think also as a professional football player, I think it's also good for Brockie to be understanding of the situation. And I think whoever is representing him will also take that into consideration as well. I don't see any footballer. I think there are some clubs, like we've seen with Highlands Park, which are taking these decisions of making sure that they relieve some of these players early, maybe to address their salary bill issues, you know. So I don't see a situation because I think in the case of Brockie, is still under the care of Sundowns as well, because of the loan policy. But then now you're asking a very important point, because if Brockie, Sundowns doesn't keep him, the loan agreement is between Sundowns and Maritzburg.
For sure.
So it would mean that now if Sundowns say they're not retaining him, and they agree that they're going to part ways now, then what happens to the loan agreement between Maritzburg and Sundowns?
Right.
But or could it be a case of they will say, okay, we're not keeping you, but pending the finishing of the season, our loan agreement is still in place,
right,
with Maritzburg. So it is a tricky one for now, and I think this goes for almost all the loan deals that are out there, you know, because most of them, in fact, all the loan deals are expiring at the end of next month as well,
right,
you know.
right.
But also with the understanding which FIFA is also given to national associations, and national associations in this case representing the national leagues, you know. So I think that's where we're sitting with this thing. But I don't think if it will be left to Brockie and his agent, I don't think they can just dump Maritzburg like that. But I think the different part is this one, that most loan deals are expiring next month.
Yes, this one's a month earlier. Almost.
Exactly. So I think this one, it's a bit tricky when the parent club is severing ties with a player.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mazola, I think raises a good point.
Yeah,
what happens in the scenario?
Yeah. No, Velile raises a good point. But if I'm trying to unpack it and understand it, I think Sundowns had I think it's on all their options. They have until the 31st of May, which is obviously it's usually, you know, a month before. So it's almost like a termination notice.
Sure.
So I think if Brockie, for instance, was actually at Mamelodi Sundowns playing for Sundowns, and his contract before they take up the option was coming to an end on the 30th of June, then Sundowns must give him a month's notice to say, we're not going to take up that option.
Right.
So that he can have a full month of his salary and then be able to negotiate a new contract starting the 1st of July. Because that's when the official transfer window sort of opens up and players can move from one club to another. So I think it's a similar situation, that it's just a matter of Sundowns telling him a month in advance that, by the way, we were supposed to take up your option, which would have kicked in on the 1st of July, but we're no longer going to do that. We will pay you your June salary, But from the 1st of July, you can do whatever you want. That's how I understand it.
Okay, so from the 1st of July, he will be unsalaried from Sundowns, who probably carry the biggest obligation as far as the salary is, even whilst he's on loan. So what does that become then? A pay-to-play kind of contract like Michael Owen had with, Man United? Does it get into that realm where you start saying, okay, cool, let's go?
Well, exactly. That's where the technicality comes in now because of COVID. Because in a normal scenario, it's just to say, look, we'll pay you until 30 June. From the 1st of July, you're on your
free
own.
Agent, yeah.
But now that the season could stretch all the way into August, what happens now? Who pays his salary?
Yeah.
We'll get the answers on the 1st of July.
This goes for most of the players whose contracts are coming to an end, and also those who also signed with new clubs as well. So
exactly.
George in the case of a new club, it's fine, isn't it?
Because also George can argue that he was gonna earn substantially more from 1st of July. But if he's still a Kaizer Chiefs player come 1st of July, what now?
No, but I mean, in that scenario, it's a bit more understandable. There's a bit more wiggle room. The one that's the most trickiest is a player is out of contract and without a team. Because, obviously now in Georgia's situation, you got the best of both worlds. If you want to do the valiant thing and stick around, Chiefs are going to pay you to do that. If you want to go and get your new salary, you're going to go and do that. But if you're there wondering where your next gig is coming from, Jonty, it's a trickier situation to be in. So that rollover doesn't work when the economics are starting to be factored in as to, okay, who pays for that?
Well, yeah, there is the budget problem with clubs as well. I mean, clubs presumably were saying, okay, this player's going to leave us on June 30, so we don't have to pay his July salary. But now, if he's playing for you, the obvious thing is that you have to pay the player's salary. You can't say, I'm not paying the player's salary, and then he plays the final 8 games of the season for you because his contract's expired. That's why there has to be an across-the-board agreement here. There has to be something put in place that's concrete that just says, okay, unless a player specifically wants out, for whatever reason, the clubs will pay that player's salary until the end of the season. Whether they can then go to government or the Ministry of Sport or the PSL and ask for some sort of financial assistance, that's to be decided between the parties. Because if I'm running a club with a budget and I've worked out, okay, I need this player to go because I'm going to pay this player's salary.
Yeah.
Then it's a tricky situation if you're kind of not a club like Sundowns, who have quite a lot of money and can probably afford some overheads or whatever, So I think it's tricky. It's really tricky and it's unprecedented, and it's got to be kind of a blanket agreement, and some grace has to be given, whether it's by the players accepting that they're going to get paid a bit less for a month, like Molefe before he goes to Sundowns, or the club saying, okay, we'll just chuck a bit of money in for your 1 month more salary for you. I think there has to be some grace given here.
Interesting times we're living in. These things are going to start unfurling over the next couple of weeks. Brockie, I guess, on Sunday is the first of the many test cases moving forward as to how these contractual discussions are going to be resolved with players who are currently looking to help teams finish off the season, or in some cases actually just, leave and move on to their new ones. So I guess we'll see over the next coming weeks. But gents, let's see what happens come Saturday when Natim Tetwa speaks. And obviously, hopefully, we hear something from the league as far as how today went. We live in hope, and maybe we'll be able to reflect on that come Monday. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. You can go off and have a good evening. Stay warm. Stay off the streets. Stay off the streets. Mazola, I know you're a holy man. Stay away from those churches, even if there's only 50 of you. As of next week, stay away.
I'm busy, Baba. I'm not going.
He's the first person I thought of when they said 50 people. He was having a virtual church service. I was like,
Well, there is also that if you can have 50 people in a church, you can surely have non-contact training.
Or you can open a restaurant up sit down and eat. I think that's a smart thing to do. Stay home, gents. I'll see you guys on Monday. We'll do this again. Okay. Until then, keep well. Sharp.